Hello everyone, and welcome back to Autonomia, the show where we bring ideas from the libertarian left to everyday people, and foster conversation on what we believe in hopes of proving that we all have far more in common than we are trained to believe. My name is Hayward, and I am your host. As always, our intro and outro music come from a song called A Bigger Cage is Still a Prison by System Failure. If you'd like to look up this song, the band spells System, C-I-S-T-E-M, for political reasons.
There's nothing I want more than to sleep under the night sky, hear the animals as they go about their lives, feel the fire warm my body, feel the mud under my toes, but tonight this cell keeps me enclosed.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for tuning back in. I always appreciate my listeners, and if you are listening now, I appreciate you. So I wanted to have a little sort of unscripted brief rant today, just talking about politics in art. That can be movies or images or any number of things where people are trying to communicate an idea or concept through the creative process, and especially how that has become very controversial, especially in recent years, about things getting too political. A great example of this would be the recent versions of Star Wars. Everyone's saying, oh, Star Wars is getting all political now. It's all overcome with social justice messages, and it's all woke now. The strange thing is that Star Wars has always been an incredibly political story, even down to the nuts and bolts of how governments function and the complex dynamics of oppression that can play out in an intergalactic empire. This is literally the story of rebels fighting back against a tyrannical government. That is a political story. And if you just watch the early movies, it can be easy to think of that story as not being political because it falls within the normal realm of what is considered just the opinions of the collective. It's not anything that's making too brave of a statement. It's basically a Nazi allegory. Think about how the enemy's soldiers are called stormtroopers. Think about how many of their weapons are literally just dolled up German weapons from World War II and World War I. It's not a very thinly veiled political allegory. And those same dynamics play out in a lot of the modern Star Wars movies. And to act like it's all of a sudden being political because they are expanding those same story dynamics, to me is absolutely ridiculous. But, let's think of another example of something that is considered political. Like William Shatner recently put out a tweet saying, "When did Star Trek get all political?" And William Shatner, of course, being Captain Kirk of the early Star Trek movies, or show, I should say. I'm not a Star Trek person, that's going to become very clear here. And someone replied to him, "You were literally there," and talked about how Star Trek always had sort of that political message. Think about how in The Next Generation, they the bald guy, who I am sorry I don't remember his name right this second, but he says, money is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work toward benefiting each other. The Next Generation, in a lot of ways, is a depiction of a post-capitalist, cooperation-based social model that exists in space. A lot of people have wondered, is it a depiction of sort of a futuristic socialist or communist society, or is it just post-capitalist? But either way, it is the depiction through art of a life and a system that is completely different to our own, and it's depicting that in a positive way. The subtext being, we can do better than what we are doing now. It is a piece of political propaganda, just like everything is. And so William Shatner responded to saying that Star Trek has always been political by saying what he did was social commentary, which is to say, it was political. That is a political statement. But because the social commentary that Star Trek, back when William Shatner was doing it, is moderate by today's standards, it's no longer considered political, but it was at the time. Think about the first interracial on-air kiss, I'm pretty sure, was with William Shatner in Star Trek, I should say. And that is a hugely political moment. That is a hugely daring thing. And there were people in that day, I'm sure, that were saying Star Trek is just woke political propaganda. Because everything is political propaganda in some way or another. Think about the movie Pearl Harbor, for example. Some people would say that movie's not political at all. It just depicts historical events. It is very political. It talks about the beginning of World War II. It depicts the American soldiers as heroic victims of a Japanese attack. It doesn't get into the more complex nuances of why that attack may have occurred or what indications that attack might have been coming, and how that plays out in the political analysis of the situation. But it is a political thing. It is giving a message, in this case, a pro-American military propaganda message. And you can agree or disagree with that, but that is a story with a political bent. It is a political telling of a historical event. Think about Norman Rockwell paintings with children giving the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Again, you might not think that's political because that is the norm. That is the common political position, but it is still a political position. Being pro-America is a political position. Swearing allegiance compulsory to the American flag is a political conditioning, but it's one you probably support. We have to learn how to recognize basically everything is political, and basically every piece of art worth looking at is saying something. I'm going to mispronounce this, but the point carries either way. Picasso made a painting called Guernica, or however the hell you say it, and it's a very chaotic, weird painting, and it's not my visual language or my visual preference, but it was depicting the bombing of a Spanish city during the Spanish Civil War, and it was trying to depict the horror of war. It's trying to give you a message. It is trying to impact you in some way, because that is the purpose of art. At the end of the day, if you're doing art that doesn't say anything, that doesn't have a message, what are you even doing? You're putting landscapes on the walls of hotels. You're making art that everyone forgets because it doesn't mean anything. Think about how whenever you tell children stories, which again are a form of conditioning, what was the moral of the stories? What you ask your children, because there is a moral to the story. There is a purpose to that piece of art, just like there is a purpose to that piece of film or that piece of music. It's not as if things are getting woke all of a sudden. It's that people are doing what art has always done and trying to put a message out into the cultural ether. And people who have a conservative bent will stand up against that because it is challenging their preconceived notions, ignoring the fact that all the media that they consume is full of cultural conditioning, is full of propaganda, is full of political messages. And that is okay. That is the purpose of art. Why would someone spend their time and creative energy making something that doesn't get a real, memorable reaction? You could even think, to some degree, as the painting of landscapes as having a message, the message being the beauty of nature. Think about how many conservationists will take pictures of the Great Barrier Reef, for example, and a lot of people might love that painting or photo, and then people will react angrily when he says, this is why we need to protect this. They say, oh, we got woke all of a sudden. No, he's building upon the message of that art, saying this is a beautiful thing and we should protect this. He is bringing his lens of the world to you. Art is a method of communication of our ideas to other people. So when I made art for a while, it usually had a very political leaning because I was using that as a language through which I could communicate with the viewers of the art that I was making. Again, that is the purpose of art, unless you are working in a very esoteric high end of art that is basically just existing for decoration. And to me, that is a much lower form, even though it exists in popularity at the higher end of the art market. Because often there's a bit more of a market for art if it doesn't challenge the power structure that the elite benefit from. But that's not what most art is. Most art has some kind of a message, because the children's story is art. The movie is art. The TV show is art. The song is art. And that art has a purpose, and that is part of the genuine human expression. So when you say, just shut up and make a Star Wars movie, you're saying sanitize what Star Wars has always been and make a purely apolitical piece of film, while also having the overarching story of fighting tyranny. Somehow make fighting tyranny apolitical. It is an impossible task, and it represents a complete misunderstanding of the purpose of art and the purpose of that story, and many others like it. What is the purpose of the World War II movies that we see? It is to tell a story. It is to create a good guy and a bad guy. It is conditioning you to have a certain understanding of the dynamics of that conflict or of that story. It is to flatten something, almost always, to flatten the complex nuances of a story and ingratiate you to one side or another. And again, that is fine. You're able to tell your stories. You're able to tell your truth. You are able to try to convince other people through your narratives. Literally everything around you has a political or philosophical or moral dimension to it. And the sooner you start to see that, the sooner you can navigate the world with your eyes open, rather than reflexively closing them as hard as you can when the light of anyone's opinion shines into your unconditioned eyes. We need to understand that it's okay for movies to be woke, because they always were. They always had a message to them. And that's fine. I keep saying this. That is fine. If you don't like the movie because it disagrees with your opinions, that is also fine. But they have every right to express their opinions in their movies and get their truth out through that art form. So what I'm really trying to get at here, just to wrap this up, is I think that there is always a message in something if it's worth saying, doing, painting, or filming. There is always a moral to the story, and that's why we read children's stories, and that's why the truly classic ones have a moral. Think about The Boy Who Cried Wolf. What is the moral of that story? It's don't tell lies to your family. That is conditioning through a form of art to elicit a certain type of behavior and worldview. But we don't talk about The Boy Who Cried Wolf as woke, because we don't disagree with the premise that it is putting forward. We talk about things being apolitical when they are what we believe. Every time someone tells me they're not political, you can say with almost absolute certainty that they are either center-right, or, which is to say liberal, or the establishment end of conservative, or something in that area, because that is the political center in America, which is to say, as we talked about in our political compass episode, the political center in America is center-right. So as a result, that is the apolitical position. So when you say you're center, you're not political, you're not equal between left and right positions, you're somewhere in the cultural norm, and that is its own cultural, political position. Because if you were to transplant your own apolitical views into a different country, you would become political all of a sudden, because you are now an outlier and your opinions are not constantly enforced all around you. Anyway, there's only so much I can milk out of this topic. I really just wanted to get it out there to explore the idea and have some room for conversation, some room for looking into these subjects and trying to grapple with these ideas. And as always, I welcome any sort of challenges to the ideas, and probably at some point down the road, guests on the show that I disagree with, because I like that conversation. I have that a lot on the radio all the time. I talk with people that are outside of my political realm and have those human conversations. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can message me on the Facebook page. That's Autonomia Podcast, AFTONOMIA Podcast, or you can email me at autonomiapod@gmail.com. If for whatever reason you decide you'd like to support this show, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Autonomia. Like, once again, that is AFTONOMIA. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.
'Cause there's nothing I want more than to sleep under the night sky. The animals as they go about their lives. Feel the fire warm my body, feel the mud under my toes. But tonight this hell keeps me enclosed. For if we don't have our freedom, if we are captured by their iron hands, then the vision for fire, it burns so much more bright. There's no justice in the system, a bigger cage is still a prison. Well, I hope that somewhere someone breaks free tonight.